Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20. Joining me to talk all things Parramatta and NRL news are my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, there is some wild stuff going on in the NRL. It's not just Parramatta related and all the bad stuff about us. We've got other clubs that are practically disintegrating at the seams.
We certainly have. It's going to make for an interesting news podcast. I can't wait to get the teeth into it, mate, to be honest. What about you, Clint?
Yeah, it's kind of been a bizarre couple of days, isn't it? You know, it certainly doesn't feel like a rugby league season or the rugby league seasons we've become accustomed to over the last couple of years. So, in terms of the Eels and then the other clubs around us, interesting viewing, I guess you could say.
I'm really looking forward to the run sheet you got prepped for us, Sixties. Before we get into that, as always, a quick shout out to the two sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf, Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, helping us get you guys those episodes 2 or 3 times a week. We do pump them out. And now, time for the news.
News team, assemble!
Well, fellas, I mean, the fallout from last week was basically the final nail in the coffin for the Eels' first grade opportunity to play finals football. We knew what was coming. It wasn't a surprise to any of us. However, let's focus a little bit on some of the bright spots over the weekend, because the lower grades both had wins, and there's a couple of positive things to talk about with the NRLW. Is there anything you want to touch on from our NRL game, fellas?
I mean,
That it's over?
I'd rather have it purged from my memory. But like Quint said, the fact that it's over is nice. That's probably the real silver lining there. And again, to everyone that attended, if you came from interstate, from country New South Wales, give yourself a massive salute. You did a great job. And yeah, and for the Eels, well, yeah.
Look, I think just going on some of the criticism that was there about BA in the presser, with talking about the efforts of players, that he wasn't questioning that in any way, that they were all trying. Do you think that's? I mean, that's obvious. Players, obviously, they don't go out there to lose. They don't go out there to not try or anything like that. But I guess what we could be critical of is that the resilience factor was a little bit low, that we didn't see them at their best, and therefore, as I've suggested as well, that there was a bit of a negative mindset that was there. I think the two teams came in with different different mindsets. So the Roosters were there believing it could be done. Maybe the Eels were there hoping it could be done. Do you think that's a fair call?
Based on what we saw unfold, I don't think it's unfair to suggest that at all. You know, there's certainly some frustrating elements to that game. You know, I think I don't think there was an Eels fan watching that who wasn't frustrated every time the Roosters had a scrum 10 meters out and went, "Uh-oh, here we go again." You know, you'd like to see us tactically try and adjust to that. And I think it wasn't until the third or fourth time that we actually looked like we had one of those scrum moves under control. You know, but look, I agree with your sentiment, Sixties. It just felt as though, you know, and that energy was probably you could feel that energy around the stadium within the stands as well. There was certainly an element of hope from our side, and you know, there was of the small contingent but loud contingent of Roosters supporters that were at Combank on Friday night. You know, they were well behind their team and rolling with the energy that their team had put out.
Yeah, you know what? It's such a contrast to a similar time last year when, first of all, I think we knocked over the Storm in the final round last year, and like the atmosphere in the stadium, the belief that was in the stadium that seemed to exude from out on the field, and then the other one that comes to mind was in terms of being in the stands was that game against the Raiders in the final series last year. It was just, there was a belief in the stadium that the Eels were going to do a number on the Raiders, and of course they delivered in one almighty performance last year. And the contrast, like you said, you could feel like it was palpable, wasn't it? That there was, I mean, we were going there in hope, not in belief, as supporters. Yep. And I think that was matched by the players. So, but let's get into a couple of positives. First of all, we saw the New South Wales Cup team prevail 22-12 with 5 of the Jersey Flegg players named to participate in that game. We did see Richard Penasini only last a couple of minutes. He was suffered a concussion in the early part of the game with a head clash. But apart from that, John, what was your takes on how the younger players performed in that game?
Yeah, sort of tempering some of our, hype is the fact that the Roosters are running last in this competition, but it is senior open age football against NRL, some NRL caliber opponents in that team, and I thought that the young kids handled the task with aplomb. Joshua Lynn, I was actually shocked, Sixties, at how composed and confident he was. Not like he's been, a scatterbrain, erratic sort of player at any point in his career as an Eel, but he just looked so in tune with the team. Had a very good game. Matty Arthur was outstanding off the interchange, came in, really took the team up a couple of gears, was ripping the pass off the carpet, had a try assist for Makahesi Makatoa for the Eels to really go ahead and take the game by the scruff of the neck. And then all the other guys, Charlie Geimer had an outstanding second half in defence, had the run that actually set up the Makatoa try. I thought Sam Tuivasa, who got the least minutes out of all the players, had a really nice impact on both sides of the ball in his limited opportunities, came in, forced an error for a really good hit in defence, had a couple of strong runs. And then, the other, I suppose the other ones that have been part of a team for a while, they're both flag eligible in Artie and Jonte, we're just doing things that they've been doing all season in a good way. Like, they've been strong and consistent, and that's exactly what they were against the Roosters again.
Yeah, Clint, what would you like to add to that?
Oh, I think we're all in awe of Matt Arthur's service. What a pass he has on him. And, once he has a good off-season or two, we'll definitely see him start to filter into the NRL squad. He, for anyone who was there on Friday for the curtain raiser New South Wales Cup game and saw Matt Arthur's minutes, despite his diminutive size relative to some of the other players on the field, he more than held his own against those boys. And as I said, the service was incredible and aggressive in defence. And the thing to encompass and support all of 60s, all the 40s anecdotes there is that not a single one of them looked out of place.
No.
And that it was very encouraging. It's also worth mentioning as well. Hayes Dunster had one of his best games of rugby league in quite some time. We all remember the game against Newcastle earlier the year at Combank where he couldn't quite keep up with Will Penasini on the line break that he made. That would have been a certain try for Hayes. We saw him take an intercept and run about 40, 50 metres, which, 12 weeks ago, he would have been run down within 10 metres of taking that intercept. So if he can get a good off-season into his legs, there's some positive, encouraging signs there. But overall, and I said it to both of you when we were in the stands, is that for a couple of these guys, there's a good launch pad. It was a good launch pad of performance to take into the off-season to try and push further. And some of those guys, I mentioned Hayes before, and obviously the Flegg boys, They should take some confidence from that game, from that performance, and use that energy going into the off season and into the preseason to ready to come again for 2024.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the performances of the players spoke for themselves. I don't really have too much more to add to that. Just that I think we saw players who are a very realistic chance of playing NRL within the next 18 months to 2 years. It may happen sooner, one or two of them, but they're definitely the future there, and it's important that the Eels hold on to those players. I don't think we've seen a dummy half at Parramatta with the skill set that young Matt Arthur has, and I think anyone that was out there could see that. It's not just the passing game that he's got there, but he challenged them a number of times, taking a dash out of dummy half, and the try assist that he put on for Makahesi Makatoa's try, where he, as you mentioned, Charlie Geimer got that good dash into about 10 metres out from the line, got a quick play of the ball. Buds Arthur ducked out of dummy half, ran at the line, found a pinpoint pass to Makahesi Makatoa, who crashed over, and of course Buds took the hit for that particular run, and you could see all the players after the try was scored, they were all straight over to Buds before they got to Makahesi, because they realised that not only was it skillful play, it was pretty brave given the difference in size between him and the players that he was running against. So yeah, big future there for him. Charlie Geimer, so tough, mate, just so tough. Runs great lines, gets so physical in defence. Sam Tuivasa, genuine impact when he came off on the field, and even looked bigger than a lot of his college opponents at 18 years of age. We of course got to see, as Forty said, the composure of Josh Lynn, and I think he's really come ahead in leaps and bounds this year. Would have liked to have seen a bit more from Richie Penasini. That's probably finished him for the season unless the Jersey Flegg team qualify for finals football. And just on that, unfortunately, the Melbourne Storm didn't help us out in any way, shape or form. And the Penrith Panthers, they clashed on the weekend, and the Storm upset the Panthers. We were expecting maybe the Panthers to get the win, which then would have put the Eels ahead of the Storm put them on the same points, and then the Eels, of course, being ahead on the differential. That hasn't happened. The Eels are now still 2 points behind the Storm. And this week, not only do the Eels have to beat the Panthers, but we have to hope that the Raiders upset the Storm. Now, that's not out of the question. They're only a couple of points behind us on the table, the Raiders. But it's still now looking for a result to go our way, looking for an upset to go our way. Just very
and
quickly on that.
Happening at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll be out at Penrith Park covering the lower grade games on Saturday. And but yeah, there was a 36-20 win to the Jersey Flegg team last week over the table-topping minor premiers, the Roosters. The Roosters can't lose the minor premiership, even though they lost to the Eels on Saturday. What a classy performance it was! The way that the Eels won the middle and really dominated the Roosters, who are a big physical side themselves and the most imposing side in the competition. And to be honest, I actually think that the 36-20 score flattered the Roosters on the weekend. I'm not saying that the Eels are that much better than the Roosters, because I'm sure the Roosters will come out firing this weekend, and the Roosters may well go on and win the competition. But it was a credit to the Eels, the way that the senior middles for the Eels, that being Brock Parker and
Tony Mattelli.
and also, sorry?
Tony Mattelli.
Oh, yeah, and Tony Mattelli were able to win the middle. I mean, Tony Matteoli's been a revelation since switching from the edge back to the middle. I think that's his future there. And, of course, this week they're strengthened by the four of those 5 players who played in the New South Wales Cup last week, returning to the team this week. So, and there's still, and you'll talk about, there's still some Jersey Flegg players that have been elevated back up to the New South Wales Cup this week. But, they really do require results to go their way. Now, just on that, this week, fellas, Jordan Rankin retires as a player. Now, we know that he's going to have a coaching career at the Eels and will move into that next season. But what a journey it's been for Jordan. I popped up a little photo tribute to him on our socials this afternoon, and there's a photo of him as a 16-year-old
the baby
playing
face
for the Titans. Yeah, through to the player with the shaved head and the beard that's now running around as the mentor for the Eels younger players in New South Wales Cup. So he's debuted at 16. You're not going to get players that can debut at that age anymore because of NRL regulations. And he's played 164 senior games across the NRL and over in England. 392 points to his name. He didn't play first grade game with the Eels because he's basically been signed there to be that steadying influence in the New South Wales Cup, and has done so for the last 3 seasons at the Eels. Even last year, taking on the most unusual role of captain coach partway through the season when Dave Kidwell left and Ryan Carr was elevated from New South Wales Cup coach to being assistant NRL coach, and there was Jordan Rankin taking on captain coach roles. So any words for Jordan before this weekend, fellas?
Yeah, I think it's the right time for him to be moving on and advancing his career into the coaching category rather than the playing category. Looking forward to seeing what he can do for the club. He's been, like you said, Sixties, a very good mentor on and off the field for a number of players, both in his actual team itself in the Cup and also for all the young kids coming from the pathways. And really keen to see what he can do when he takes over as a full-time coach.
Yeah, Clint?
It's pretty incredible, a player debuting at 16, and I think he was the 3rd youngest player to ever make his debut, off the top of my head. So, and by that math, I think he's 31. He's spent half his life playing senior rugby league. That's pretty amazing, So he's obviously done it across a number of competitions, but the NRL and the Super League, it'd be really, really interesting seeing how his career as a coach progresses. Obviously, there was footage of him in the SG Ball grand final on the sideline there cheering on the boys, and his involvement with those junior pathways. So it'd be interesting seeing how his coaching pedigree comes up with some of those guys that he's been already doing plenty of mentoring work with.
Yeah, so we've heard some very good, had some very good words said about him through the club. A lot of credit that's been given to him. Very positive words from the younger players as well about the influence that he's had on them. So yeah, we wish him well in his farewell game, and then also wish him the best of luck moving forward with his coaching career at the Eels. John, Team List Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take us through the main talking points across 4 grades of Eels selections?
Yeah, we'll work our way up to the 2 main events in the NRL and NRLW. So the Jersey Flegg, obviously boosted by those players coming back from the New South Wales Cup, like you mentioned, 60s. That means that you've got the likes of Lynn, Arthur, Tuaviti, and Geimer coming back. However, they're going to be without Jock Brazel this week. I'm not sure if he picked up an injury or a suspension last week, but they're going to be going to Penrith without their talismanic edge forward. But they do have a very good team in spite of that. Tweedle, Kamalafi, Loizu, Talangi, and Martin in the back line. Blaze able to play centre because Lynn is back. And then you've got obviously Lynn and Sanders in the halves, Parker, Arthur, Matteelli in the front row, Guy Matupo and Lanars, the versatile captain of the team, rounding out the pack. Pryke, Reed, Latu, and Tuavaiti on the interchange. No Lance for Lima as well, so I'm not sure if he's out due to injury or suspension, but that is a very good team. And unfortunately, like you said, they're relying on the Raiders to spring an upset down in Melbourne, but neither Melbourne nor Parramatta will know how the top 5 shakes out before kickoff because they're playing at the same time. So at full time, there's going to be either a very bittersweet team for Parramatta or a very happy team.
Yeah, let's hope that it's happy, and we'll be there, as I said, to provide coverage on that game. We'll also be there for what is Jordan Rankin's final game, which is the New South Wales Cup. What's the main selection takes from that, mate?
Yeah, part of a doubleheader out at Penrith with that flag game. So for this one, Zach Sini makes a return from a broken hand. He's going to slot into the centres where Richard Benassini was playing. Obviously no Richard in any grade this week with that concussion. Brendan Hands has been shifted out of the NRL squad. He'll start at 5'8" alongside Rankin in the halves. Front row and back row, I think, are the same 8-13 that took on the Roosters, which means Makatoa, Yates, Ogden, Murchie, Keir, and Rodwell. Bang them out in a row quickly. Then it's all, despite the flag being so strong this week, Sixties and Clint, it's still an all-flag affair on the interchange. So we have those players coming back to the flag that played last week, and instead you got Jacob Davis, Jonte Jr., Bethan Meesa, Lachlan Mears Crab, and Lockie Blackburn running the rotation in the reserve grade game. So a testament to the depth that's available in the flag this year, and hopefully, I sincerely hope, a testament to what we can see in the Cup next year with all these guys forming the basis of a good, young, talented Cup team.
Yeah, I think if they're flag age eligible, it'll be interesting to see which players are elevated to New South Wales Cup next year. I think that will give a little bit of a guide as to the trajectory of some players, but I don't think it'll tell the full story because there's a wealth of SG ball players who didn't get an opportunity to play too much football for Jersey Flegg this year, and you can imagine they're going to be forming the core of the Jersey Flegg team next year. And I think what we're likely to see is a New South Wales Cup team that's heavy on youth, and it will also be reflected in maybe a younger Jersey Cup team than what we've seen or what we could potentially see. I mean, it's up to a 21 years of age group, but I think we'll see a number of 19-year-olds that are running around in that Jersey Flegg team. Now, mate, you were really bullish about what you saw in the NRLW team. How is the selection panned out this week?
Yeah, got a couple of changes this week. Unchanged backline, which means Church, Fay, Hunt, Toi Hiku, and Donovan going 1 to 5. Obviously, we're all very pumped on what Cassie's been doing, but Church and Fay also having very good seasons too. In the halves, also unchanged this week. We do have a change in the pack though. Jade Fanua, like Zaxini, coming back from a broken hand, so good for her to get back into the action. She's going to start at lock forward. I'm actually really keen to see what she can add to this team because she was thrust into the halves sort of out of nowhere in round one, and obviously it's pretty tough for a forward to slot into halfback and make a difference. So she comes back into her preferred position, can do a bit of ball playing through the middle. That pushes Tyler Amiatu, probably our breakout star in the forward pack, into the front row, which is much of a muchness for her. She started at lock last week. Her mission statement's going to be exactly the same. She's going to go out there and run hard. But yeah, that rounds out the changes to the pack. On the interchange, though, a couple of new faces. Nakia Davis-Welsh is back in the team. She feels like she's a week in, a week out right now. But she's on the interchange. And then the big surprise, there's a mid-season pickup. The Eels have gone to the formidable Canterbury Bulldogs Tarsha Gale team and picked up a young back rower by the name of Noaria Kapua, who's a goal-kicking edge-back rower that also repped for New South Wales 19s this year. So it looks to be a handy pickup for our NRLW team, and I'm very interested to see how she's used.
Yeah, it actually surprises me that we were picking up someone from that Canterbury team. I would have thought that they don't have an NRLW team to lock her into, but yeah, it's a good sign that we were able to identify her because she is a talent.
Yeah, they're the sort of aggressive moves you always like to see a team make, especially when, it feels like you're sort of picking on Canterbury in that regard because they don't have the pathway to the NRLW, but that's what you got to do. You got to be opportunistic and seize the moment, seize the advantage that's in your favour, because right now it is, but once Canterbury establish that pathway, obviously it's going to be a lot tougher to poach those sort of players. But right now we're in the box seat for it, and there might be a couple other players you can probably look at from those sort of squads that don't have a very obvious pathway to full-time rugby league football.
Yeah, there's been late changes in every week. Do you see anything on the extended bench there that might get a last minute call up?
That's interesting. It's hard to say. We are potentially a little bit light on middle forwards at that bench looking at it, because Capri is obviously a dummy half utility. Yes, you can push Ruben into that lock role as the undersized lock forward there, and that helps mitigate it somewhat. But I think Shannon Muru was the only recognised middle forward. I know Nakia Davis-Walsh can play lock technically, but they'd be as the ball playing lock, not the work rate impact lock. So I would not be shocked if we saw someone drop out. I'm not sure who. Hopefully not. It's not the rookie, because I'm really keen to see what she can do. But maybe Nakia, I suppose maybe Capri if they just want to go for the one dummy half. And then you'd have maybe someone like Ruby Jean or Maddie Jones come into the team to bulk up that middle rotation.
Clint, are you feeling as bullish as John about what you've seen from the Eels NRLW team the last couple of weeks?
Well, it's certainly been improved efforts, and it's kind of not too dissimilar to last year, in which the girls took a couple of games to build into the season. Obviously, the season was a bit shorter, and we were the beneficiaries of that last year and being able to string a couple of games together and make the grand final. But it feels as though they're edging closer towards a win. And at this point, we said it a couple of weeks ago. All you got to do is try and stack some performances on top of each other. Not worry about the result, but just try and analogy I like to use is in terms of building a house. Just lay one brick as well and as good as you can possibly lay a brick, and then try and lay another one on top of it equally as good, if not better. And then eventually you'll have a pretty well built house. So. That's certainly the remit and the way in which I see it for the girls at the moment. There's some encouraging signs. It would be even better if we had both Albert and Sherrington available to play. But that's just where the girls are at the minute. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing them build on the last couple of weeks. This is probably another good opportunity for them to try and break their drought and get their first win of the year.
Yeah, I think there are some real, genuine, quality, potentially representative level players that are running around for the Eels in the NRLW at the moment that we're seeing. Like 40, I can't help but think that if we can better utilise Cassie Toihiku, that she is going to be like one of the aces in the Eels team in years to come, and hopefully we do manage to keep her on our books. Just going to finish off our Eels news with some NRL 360 takes on the Eels. First of all, I think they read my reports on the series of on the Eels autopsy of the season, because they spoke about the Eels roster, the injuries, the suspensions. So that was very familiar territory for us listening to it tonight, and it basically echoed what has been written on TCT about the Eels season. And just as a note for any of our listeners, there were to be two other parts, being the draw and the officiating. And I just thought those looking at those aspects, yes, I think they're relevant, but I think in the context of how the season finished, it felt like they were more excuses than reasons. And I mean, mind you, I still see them as reasons, but I'm trying to read the room there, and I think it was probably best to keep the focus on the things that we could do something about this year, and there wasn't too much that we could do about the draw or some of the officiating. Fellas, what was your thoughts on what they had to say?
Yeah, look, like you, Sixties, when I was listening along to it, I couldn't help but have a wry smile come across my face, ear to ear. Cheshire Cat grin, going, I've heard this somewhere before. It's almost though it's been penned by one of the three people on this show. But that's hardly new territory for anyone that listens to us with any sense of regularity, because you often hear your talking points regurgitated, Sixties. It's because you're very in tune with the game of rugby league in our club. But look, it's absolutely something worth considering, and I say that from the perspective of what you've raised, Sixties, not from the points being echoed in the wider media. All they're doing is giving your voice a platform, mate. So maybe you should thank them. But look, I do think there's some credence to that, and it's something that's just going to have to come out of our end of season review. And there's basically a couple of options with it. We can continue down the same path. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So we can choose to alter our path and look at alternative options. And if you ask me, we've said it quite a number of times this year. It is healthy and wise to leave some space in the cap, but you've got to pull the trigger at some point. And that's kind of been my catchphrase for this year. Is you've got to have a plan and go. You know what? This is the time in which we probably break our own rule, and we're doing it because we know that the benefits far outweigh the cons of making this decision. And you have the ability to make those decisions and the resources there to make those decisions, knowing that you will eventually do it at some point. Because if you don't, then it's just underutilized or unused resources. So what's the point in creating the opportunity for it in the first place? So look, there's something for us to consider going into this off season. And hopefully we can take it as a lesson learnt moving forward.
Well, look, I will have to say that there's plenty of people out there that disagree with me, and they're quite entitled to have their opinion, and may well be right. I mean, there is no shortage of people who have been calling for BA's head, and we're not calling for BA's head.
Nope.
But I'm not going to shout down people that take a different opinion to what we have. What I like to think about when I'm having the opinion that I have is that I'm trying to base it on the facts of the season. The facts being a shortened roster, a roster that lacked in depth in the back line, the number of injuries and suspensions that happened during the season, with that, the fact that going forward, we need to make some improvements on our roster. Now, could BA have done things better this year? Well, John and I, we've had our takes on the season where we've been critical. I wasn't happy with his clean ruck that he was aiming for this year. It should have worked in theory if the officiating did what it was supposed to do with the clean ruck. It didn't. It was evident early in the season. I think he hung on to that for a bit too long. And by the time that we actually changed that, because whether people realised it or not, we stopped having that clean ruck probably about a month or so before the end of this season. I think the damage was already done with the officiating. So we have an issue there. John's taken issue with BA over his use of the interchange. He not happy. You haven't been happy with the minutes, have you, John, with the rotation?
Yeah, he hasn't always gotten it right. There's no doubt. Like in my mind, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But it's been a failure at multiple levels here. I think it's unfair to level 100% of the blame at any particular facet of our football operations, although there are areas I feel like we've let ourselves down in more than others. But yeah, there's no doubt the coaching staff absolutely have a portion of blame to shoulder.
Yeah, and I guess where that comes in as well is that's subjective. Yeah, when any look at a performance, and be it the players, be it the coaching, that's a subjective assessment. I've tried to look at things objectively, which is if you don't have a full roster, that pretty much speaks for itself. If you only have 7 outside backs and those that are within those outside backs have had injury concerns, or if you miss the number of games that have been missed this year, and it's well north of, I think from memory off the top of my head, it was something like about 120 games or something like that, or more, that were missed combined through injuries and suspension this year. I mean, that's just significant. Like you cannot, I mean, that is actually quantifiable. Those sorts of features of the season. The subjective is, as I said, the performance of players, the performance of coaches, officiating, those sorts of things. So, keeping it objective, we look at what the roster looks like next year, and we're down on right now as things stand. There's 27 players signed with the club for next year. For the top 30, that is, we have 6 players to cover the outside backs, and that includes the elevation of Zaxini and the continued rehabilitation of Hayes Dunster. So you had the 4 outside backs that played on the weekend, plus Zaxini and Hayes Dunster. You have 6 players in the top 30, in the current 27 that are signed, to cover the 4 spine positions. So 6 full-time players for the 4 spine positions. At the moment, there is no backup for Gutho. And if you were to play someone out of position at fullback to replace Gutho, if he was out injured or suspended, whatever the case may be, you therefore, at this stage, are weakening a outside back group that only contains those 6 players that I talked about before. So we have a problem. And the only coverage outside of that is that you have Brendan Hands, and who's there who can cover. I guess he could cover the halves, but he's basically there as one of the dummy halves. And you have Dejan Arce, who is one of the only cover for Dylan Brown and Mitch Moses. I think we're okay for forwards, but those 2 groups of positions, the spine and the outside backs, we've got a problem. Now, we just mentioned the forwards. Here's the other thing that was mentioned on NRL 360. They are linking Isaiah Papali'i with a likely return to the Eels.
Yeah, amidst all the turmoil at West Tigers, with Tim Sheen's leaving, there's looks like there's some happenings. But God, you love ice, but 60s, is that roster balance?
Well, I mean, you have to be talking about. I mean, have they got the salary cap money to get him next year? I think they actually do. They've obviously got the numbers that can fit him in. But as you said, as much as we'd love to see Ice back at the club, and we think he would be a positive addition for the club, how does that help the outside back or the spine scenario? I mean, it gives us a very powerful forward pack. I mean, you're actually talking about squeezing Ice in to a pack that generally is, I mean, people that will look at the Eels pack at full strength and go, okay, where does he fit in now? I guess there's people out there who aren't fond of the form of some forwards this year, but you have to think, given a rest of the for the off season. I know we got the Pacifica Test, but let's leave that aside for one moment. But the Eels are going to get more of a rest now anyway, because even if there's some that play in the Pacifica Test, they're getting their rest after this weekend. They're not playing during the finals series, and they're getting an early. They finish up a week before every other team, so they've got like 5 weeks of rest now. You have to think they're going to be relatively refreshed with the forwards. So the opportunity cost is a roster position and the money as well. So maybe that's something that our listeners might want to talk about in any discussions on this post. What would you do if you had the opportunity to take Ice back? Do you take him back? And if so, do you release a player? What do you do? What's the answer in terms of outside backs? Give us your opinion. John, very quickly from you. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say no to Ice because of how fantastic he was for us, the combination he has of Mitchell Moses. I know that Bryce obviously has struck up a very strong combo with Mitch too, but there's no reason why in a vacuum, you'd say no to Ice coming back. You know, he's a outstanding player that played his best football as an Eel. But I don't think you can have him back unless you're confident you can also solve that other issue. I know it's a little bit risky. I'm ready to hand wave the spine depth to some degree. If it meant, if I had to choose between the two, I'd be more confident about our spine staying healthy. And if they went down with injury, it's not like your season's guaranteed loss, but it's a huge loss anyway, even if you bring in a replacement level player. So I would be willing to cop that as an opportunity cost, because backs always go down or get suspended because of the way they, when they're jamming and being aggressive and whatnot. If they can't get Ice if they can't get Ice without guaranteeing to themselves that they can figure out this backline problem, then I'm not sure it's worth the move. And that is in no way a knock on Ice, because I love him as a player, as a character, and as a fit for this club. But yeah, it'd feel like you're just treading water if you were to bring him back and then leave your backline stocks where they are currently heading into 2024.
Yeah, Clint, what's the solution?
Well, these are definitely opportunities that you have to consider. And if it turns out that there is the chance for us to bring Ice back to Parramatta, then we need to find a way to make it happen. But to the point that Forty was just making, and that we've been discussing throughout this pod and throughout the year, we need to find a way to create space in the top 30. No one's doubting his quality and the value that he adds to our team. And you put it out there, most fans today would absolutely agree and most likely take him back in a heartbeat. But the fact of the matter is that we've got 27 of 30 roster spots filled, and with that backline and half depth conundrum that exists, it would then leave only 2 other spots there, and we've possibly got another 2 or 3 players we need to put into the side at the very least to help create that balance. So, the answer then becomes, or the question then becomes, do you have the ability to move someone on? And if so, are you going to have to do that at cost? Well, if you're moving someone under contract on, then the answer to that question is yes, you are going to have to do that at cost. So then we have to look at it from the perspective of, if we were to go down that path and to examine bringing ice back, what trigger do we pull in relation to that? Because people might have an opinion about the players that they'd want to release, but they also have to be desirable to other clubs to pick up as well.
Yes, you've nailed it. You've nailed it.
So you can identify player X and say, look, they haven't added as much value as we want. We want to move them on. Yeah, well, that's great. Who else is going to want them then? You have to do it from the lens of because no club's going to take a one-sided deal because it suits Parramatta. It has to be something that's mutually beneficial to some degree. So, and people might point to the likes of Canterbury saying, well, they find a way. Well, we've spoken over the last couple of weeks of some of our, I guess, I'll leave it at suspicions into how they conduct business out that way. So, I do urge people who are joining in this conversation in the comments section of this pod, if you were to bring ice back, what type of player and who are you looking at that might be desirable to other clubs, and then what the sort of financial arrangement would be in making that happen, because it's not going to be all one-sided and just work out Parramatta's way. There has to be upside for any potential departing player and the potential club that they might go to. So you'd be looking, because we've got quite a bit of forward depth, you'd be looking at some clubs that might be looking to add to their forwards and looking at who might be an option there.
And it's also interesting that you raised about how other clubs are able to do this, because I think the other interesting thing that they spoke about on 360, and which has been a topic for discussion with a lot of Eels fans, has been the fact that the Eels don't really operate with TPAs. And it was suggested on 360 tonight that there was an element of paranoia with the Eels after being caught back in 2016 with dodgy salary cap management, and that the Eels do not, and to use the quote that they use there, stretch the salary cap rules the way that other clubs do. And or that we are not as good at doing that, let alone, I guess, even trying to do it. And do you think that's a valid point, John?
100%. I think we've inferred as much on the podcast in the past that in an era where there's plenty of teams been dabbing, sort of dipping their feet into the greyness of the salary cap, after what happened in 2016, the Eels are undoubtedly one of the few clubs that would be completely cap compliant. And, between that and the fact that we, in general, even when we were cheating, weren't great TPA contenders in that regard, despite being such a big presence in the NRL market, means that you're operating at a huge disadvantage. And we've been successful in spite of that, rather than being boosted by that. But that can only carry you so far, can't it? And I think we, among other things, that is one of the sort of hurdles that hit us this year, was we got pulled apart by the salary cap. We lost Murata Niokore, Isaiah Papali'i, Ray Stone, Oregon Kafusi, so on and so forth. We had to go out there and find value pickups to replace them, and we obviously hit the jackpot in someone like Jermaine Hopgood, but by the same token, we also missed the target completely with someone like Jerome Masia. So when you're operating with those sort of confinements on you, it puts a lot of pressure on recruitment to consistently hit the ball out of the park with your guys that overperform relative to their cap slot. So, yeah, it is a big disadvantage. It is a big deal.
Okay, fellas. Well, let's move on, because we've got plenty of juicy NRL news this week. And let's start with what's been reported today about the West Tigers chairman, Lee Hagipantelis, that he's looking at, or he sent a warning letter that he would sue the West's Life podcast because they'd made comments which I guess we can assume were meant to be humorous, that part of their offer to Mitch Moses to lure him to the Tigers was that Hagipantelis was going to drive Moses to and from Tigers training in his Ferrari. Now, obviously, Hagipantelis has taken exception to that. He does have a history with that particular podcast. And the podcast has apologised. But then, of course, they've reportedly then backtracked and had more cracks at the chairman. So,
I mean,
um,
who gets upset by something like that? Like,
can you, John?
Who has public arguments with fans?
yeah. Like,
hang on. I want to stop both of you. Can you throw in some allegedlys in there?
yes,
Just
allegedly.
just
Yes.
keep us
Yes,
safe.
allegedly.
Reporting
allegedly.
on the alleged situation. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly the Streisand effect in action, because it's not like they were trying to cover something up and then draw attention to it, but it's certainly Streisand affected it into the NRL stratosphere because of how stupid and petty it is to send that sort of like legal cease and desist to a podcast about those sort of comments, because how is that defamatory? Like,
Yeah,
it's not. It's not hurting the question of his character in any sort of public opinion. Like, it is humorous and silly and plays on NRL cap stuff that we've spoken about with every club pretty much. But yeah, I mean, I feel for the Westlife podcast guys, because that it is never fun to get that sort of mail, is it? Especially when it's about the club you support and when they're the ones that have been screwing up at every turn.
Can I just
Allegedly.
mention a couple of curious things with this? The Westlife podcast is sponsored by West Ashfield, their leagues club. Now, like, it beggars this makes it, I think, even more odd that he has had quite a history, Hagipantelis, of a war of words with this particular podcast. The West's Ashfield Leagues Club sponsors the Westlife podcast. I'm pretty sure that maybe in a similar way to us, they make appearances, I think, at West Leagues at Ashfield as well. And that Lee Hagipantelis, of course, he's the chairman of West Tigers. He's also the principal of the West Tigers major sponsor, Bryden's Lawyers. It's could you script this better? Like, for to be in the news. I mean, it's and by the way, we can't even use the word alleged, because Westlife is sponsored. It's on their podcast that they're sponsored by West Ashfield. Lee Hagipantelis is the chairman of West Tigers, of which the West's Leagues Club is. Are they the majority shareholder of the West Tigers? West's Leagues?
I believe they are.
They should be. That's usually how the NRL licenses work.
Yeah.
So
and Hagipantelis is the principal of the major sponsor, Bryden's Lawyers, who are as I said, major sponsor of the West Tigers.
The principal sponsor, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It is an interesting web.
I mean, I've noticed that there's been a bit of a turn in the NRL media in the last week or so with the Tigers, sort of, at least the players, ex-players that is, talking that, the old age of it begins in the front office, because it feels like throughout all this saga, it's not like they've been unscathed, but they've escaped the magnitude and degree of criticism they deserve for all the operations they've been doing, allegedly, with the club, because they've churned through coaches, they've churned through players. If you go back and do like an ex-coach and best of ex-players roster for the Tigers, they've actually got a premiership caliber team that they've let walk, and all with pretty much the same front office. So, where really is the fault with the Tigers?
Well, do you know what? If nothing else, Clint, they're a generous club because they gave a barbecue to Luke Brooks as a parting gift.
I didn't see the Tigers Titans game live. So I saw this after the fact, and I'll admit, when I saw a picture of this in my newsfeed, I thought someone had mocked something
Yeah,
up
just
in
like
Photoshop.
meme the Photoshop and just threw in a
Yeah,
barbecue.
I just assumed it was a meme, and then a fan created meme, and then when I sort of I saw the articles about it after the fact, I went, oh no, this is absolutely legit. Yeah, look, really unique, kind of weird that they chose to present him with a gift on game day in front of the fans, let alone it being a barbecue, like presenting a gift in front of the fans. Like do that stuff in your own time. Like, if that's your prerogative to give a player something. But at the same token as well, boys, and I know that I think the Sydney Morning Herald put an article out about it today, that it's not something that has to be declared under the salary cap. Well, you know what? Fui Moi Moi gave me a call this afternoon and says he wants the
I
plane
remember
tickets
that.
for his family
Yeah.
taken back off our cap from
You
2009.
talk about tone deaf in the NRL. Come on, but
Oh.
I mean, to the Tigers' credit, they got the win against the Dolphins. Maybe that was the real issue. They weren't giving Luke Brooks a barbecue every week before the game. Maybe that's what.
Well, that's the golden nugget. I dare say they'll roll them out. They'll roll them out for 25 weeks straight next year.
Look,
But
I enjoy a quality barbecue and the work you can do with a good barbecue in terms of all your culinary stuff. But come on, like he's like your longest tenured half. It's an end of an era for the club. Give him like a watch or a ring or something.
yeah,
Like something that's actually got a bit
Something
of
and do that on the awards night. Do that at the club awards night,
60s.
or do that privately.
Yeah, like you said, 60s, like a framed,
Framed
jersey with like some photos and milestone things put in there. Like,
Yeah, because you know what, the fans would identify with something like that.
Oh my god!
I think I was driving somewhere when I think it was Triple M cut back in, like it was almost a
Breaking news.
A barbecue has been wheeled out.
Maybe there's a humorous backstory to it, like James Maloney, and there's something about barbecuing on his own that the Tigers know and we don't.
Yeah. Let's not open that up again.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah. Now, I want to finish with the South stuff. So before we get to that, just very quickly, Manly's dropped Josh Schuster. Any surprise? I'm not surprised.
No.
I mean, it was
It's been a long time coming.
Not in the slightest. Yeah. A few weeks too late.
Yeah. Spud was on NRL Tonight, I think it was, and was like, sort of shielding Schuster because he's got a bit to do with him as a, sort of aid to the club and the training he does with his gym. But yeah, I mean, all the physical talent in the world, and I don't think he's got the appetite to dominate. Obviously, there's a joke there about, appetite elsewhere, given the shape he's been in at various times. But I think he's actually done okay this season, keeping himself in shape after the mid-season fat camp. But unless something clicks massively for him mentally, he is going to be one of those guys that we're going to talk about in 10, 15 years saying, oh, you remember Schuster? Oh, yeah, that guy, he could have been anything. But,
he was the player who always turned it on against the Eels.
Well, yeah, true. True. Although it was more of a case of all his silly kicks happened to bounce the right way against Parramatta, whereas for other teams,
that's it.
They bounced the way they would usually bounce. Look, Manly don't need him as a half anymore, which he lost a lot of leverage there with obviously Jake joining the club initially, but then more significantly Luke Brooks. It's on him now. Manly are obviously on the books, on the hook on the books for a lot of money, and that's going to hurt them. But they can drop him now. He's just an edge forward now, and they're not expendable by any means, but they're far more expendable than a 5'8". So he has to do a lot of soul searching.
Yeah. Now let's dive into what's happening over there at South Sydney, because it's almost a case of where do we start tonight. Now, I'm going to get rid of the easy one first, which is Latrell Mitchell's copped a 1 week suspension for the elbow to the back of the head. You happy with 1 week?
You know what? In a vacuum, I am. I feel, given all the cheap shit that he's had in his game for a long time, that they could have come down a lot harder and I would not have been upset. but at least one game is an actual suspension, whereas I thought he might have gotten off given it's Latrell.
Yeah, Clint.
1 week is progress in the context of what John just said. But personally, when you look at the intent, or if you want to infer it as intent, because Latrell went after Tyson Frizzell. There was definitely some frustration in what he did versus the clumsy effort of RCG in the Titans game, and that getting 4 weeks. Again, it's kind of the theme of the judiciary for all NRL fans out there. We can all cop whatever the punishment is. We just want to see some consistency in the application of what determines that punishment, so we can all make some sense of it. So that way, we know when any given offence has occurred. All right, well, that's probably going to be 2 weeks. Not okay. Well, that's probably a week or two, and then we get the surprise of 4 weeks. What? Why?
Yep.
And so on and so forth.
Now let's build the other aspects of things that are going on at South to see if we can join any dots. Okay, there is the rumoured favouritism towards Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker by head coach Jason Demetriou, that he doesn't apply the same discipline standards to them as he does to other players. We then also had the linking in, I guess, with that is that Latrell Mitchell's gets away with lazy play all the time, and that was highlighted on 360 for his game on the weekend.
It's the first time they've ever actually caught him out on it too. This has been a long time coming. Like, yeah, he makes the flashy plays, but he is by far the laziest fullback in the competition.
Yeah, and we can't comment on anything to do with favouritism in terms of discipline because we're not aware of anything that's happened within the South Sydney camp where there's been anyone that's been treated any differently to anyone else. That's all the story that's maybe coming from a leak within the club. I think one of the reports on it in the media might have referenced that the assistant coaches were at odds with Jason Demetriou.
I saw a Sydney Morning Herald report that said that Burgess and John Morris, the former Eel and also the head coach for the Sharks at one point, confronted Demetriou about the perceived double standards or unfair standards that are favouritism that are there, and it led to a crisis meeting. And evidently, the club backed their head coach and stars over the two assistant coaches. So Burgess, who was departing at season's end, has been shipped out immediately. Likewise for Morris.
Now, that was the point that I was leading to. Has that now been confirmed? Because that was, as it was reported as breaking news on 360 tonight, they said that there was a meeting, a board of directors were meeting tonight to make a decision on that. Has that been confirmed? Has it been, is it out there now that the decision has been made?
I'm not sure if the article has been updated, but Michael Chammas on the Sydney Morning Herald has said that they deferred the decision on the future of the two assistant coaches until tomorrow morning as they consult Russell Crowe. So, but apparently the way it's been intimated towards Chammas and the way he sort of had the heading and whatnot says that would imply that they're leaning towards parting ways with the assistant coaches. So this isn't a small little issue now with the South Sydney. This is actually like a future defining like sort of schism. Like they've got some real issues here.
And of course, the other thing there that was part of that jigsaw puzzle was Demetriou liking a post on Instagram that was critical of a couple of the players. It was actually a reply from someone to an Instagram post, and he's evidently accidentally hit the like button.
Yes, accidentally
on the criticism, saying something about these reserve grade standard players or words to that effect.
Yeah,
so
how can we win for these reserve grade plotters or something along the lines was the vibe of the tweet or the Instagram post, whatever it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Why an NRL coach is out there on Instagram
Mm.
looking to read takes like this, and their finger is anywhere near the the little heart.
Well, look, it can happen very incidentally, but the question is, the first question you ask is, why is an NRL head coach on social media in the first place? You know, I think when you're holding a position like that, it's time to deactivate any accounts you have if you got them, because it just could not be healthy for you either way, regardless if the team's going well and they're firing, or if they're playing poorly and struggling. You just don't need that type of background noise in a job that's as tumultuous as being an NRL head coach.
Clint, can I say to you, the times when I have accidentally liked something has been when I've gone to comment and I've hit the like button instead of that. But you know, like, to hit a like next to a reply is.
It could have been trying to scroll back up. Look, and the reason I say is because I do it all the time on my Twitter feed. You know, I've got fat thumbs. You know, if you think of that Simpsons episode, you know, the fingers you've used are too fat to dial. I think that's me. So I can give a little bit of a leeway there. Maybe I'm being generous. You know, but
you're a kinder person than
again,
I am, Quint.
but again, you know, I question more why a coach would be on social media in the first place.
There was another.
Well, the thing is, it's, you know, like if you're scrolling on Instagram, which it was on, you got plenty of screen there to scroll without going near the hearts. You know, like you're scrolling near the middle of the screen. If you're scrolling over on the side, you're asking for trouble because you're going to be liking everything.
And the other thing too, boys, is before all this started developing in the last 24 hours, I don't know if there's any traction to this one, but there was a bit of a rumour on social media about a potential backflip from South Sydney's star recruit for 2024.
Mm.
So maybe there is, like, just to add to more unrest there, maybe. And given how close Jack Whiten is to, or supposedly close he is to Latrell Mitchell, I don't know. Like, that would be the cherry on top of South Sydney, wouldn't it? To, you know, dump assistant coaches, lose your marquee signing who's coming to you for a song.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be. I mean, is it outside the realms of possibility now?
Not when you.
Well,
when you see these,
yeah, when you see some of this stuff, exactly. You know, I think 49 are about to say the same thing. You see this stuff going, it certainly sounds like there's a bit of noise going on. But at the same time, you know, say that were to transpire, South Sydney would require some compensation to allow that. You know, they've based their whole recruitment strategy around the acquisition of and their squad for the next 3-4 years around the recruitment of Jack Whiten. You know, and I know he went there on less money than what Canberra offered him initially, but it still wasn't chump change. And you know, you're obviously making some very big decisions around the makeup of your squad when you recruit a player on big money like they have Jack Whiten. So you know, they then have an opportunity cost or loss, I should say, by not being able to recruit other players if that were to happen. Given you know, now a lot of those big players who are making their moves for next year have settled their futures, or supposedly so. I think Canberra would be not only just up for a bill to South Sydney, but likewise, you know, I doubt Jack's going to turn around and say, yeah, well, I'm willing to go through all this trouble just to be paid the same as what I am at South. I still want the 1.1 that you initially offered me.
Imagine the cojones walk in and demand that. I was going to.
Yeah, but exactly right. You know, like it sounds bizarre, and you're like, you know, the audacity, if that were to actually transpire. But at the same time, you know, he's not going to suddenly go, well, hold on, you thought I was 1.1, and now you don't want to offer me that. All right, well, you know what, I don't know. Like when you're a player of his profile and what he means to Canberra, if Canberra really want to keep him, I suppose it's largely just a question of who's got the leverage, the bigger leverage in this situation. I kind of feel like Jack would still have that over Canberra.
Well, I guess this is the thing that happens when the form of a club that's expected to do well drops off. Now, we've seen plenty of it with our own Eels this season, but I think it's fair to say that South may well have topped it, well and truly. I mean, I think with what's transpiring in this 24 hours, this is potentially one of the biggest NRL stories to drop this year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's almost been, it feels weird to say, but it's almost been slept on right now. Like, in terms of the seismic implications, like this could tear the club apart. Like this is a really big deal, and this is very much a defining moment for Demetriou, Walker, and Mitchell. Like, if it really is to the point where assistant coaches have called out the head coach, and Michael Chammas is one of the premier reporters in the game, he's got no reason to get this one, wrong as a mistell. Like, goodness, like this is actually, in terms of rugby league stories, like non-off-field drama, players doing dumb stuff in that regard, this is probably one of the biggest stories we've seen in a long time.
I mean, where is it in the NRL that a team that's on the cusp of finals football, and let's face it, that they will pretty much get there if they beat the Roosters in that last week, that in this situation with one game left in the season, that they sack their assistant coaches. Now, if by any chance this doesn't transpire, that they don't, how are the relationships going to work? If, like, you'd have to assume, yes, they are going to sack them, because to not sack them, it means that someone, like potentially the head coach, if it was the head coach that said this has to happen, could he be expected to work with them? If they are sacked, how do the players respond to this? How does the club politics work around this? I wonder how sponsors feel. This is as big as it gets. Like, both assistant coaches, and neither of them low profile, really.
No, a former head coach who still would be aspirational and would have lots of backers to be another NRL head coach in Morris, and a guy that everyone in the media is touting as the next big deal once he comes back from his ESL star what's it called, traineeship or apprenticeship.
Yeah, it beggars belief that it's got to this stage. I mean, we can, perhaps suppose what's happened. We can put forward our theories on what has happened, speculate. But, yeah, I mean, do you speculate that the coaches, the assistant coaches, have been the source of the news getting out to the media about internal discipline issues? Is that where you go with this?
I mean,
or is it simply that if it all relates to this, and I mean if it relates to this, is it simply that because they have such a different opinion on the way that the team is being run, that the head coach has said, I can't work with them anymore. Even this late in the season, I can't do it anymore. Because you'd have to assume, given what's widely said about these particular coaches, and especially Sam Burgess, that they are popular with the players.
Yeah, well, so everyone was praising Burgess for his like player management and leadership abilities, weren't they? Just like literally a week ago. So,
well, look, I guess if you're looking for someone to take the heat off the West Tigers this week, the Tigers can probably give thanks to the Rabbitohs, because what is bound to happen is that we know what the back page story is going to be tomorrow. It's going to be all about the Rabbitohs, surely.
As it should be. This is a serious story.
Yeah. So, fellas, what a juicy lot of NRL news we've been able to get into tonight. I hope people have enjoyed this. No doubt there are plenty of comments that people would like to add to to the podcast tomorrow when it's posted. If you do, don't forget all your allegedlys. 40, you might have to get in there and do a bit of editing and add a few allegedlys in there. But again, we repeat that. It's a lot of allegedlys. If you've got something that you want to say that that might be not substantiated. Thank you again, of course, to all of our listeners. Thank you, John and Clint. And, of course, to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and, of course, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. It is always a huge thanks to them, because without them, we don't present the Cumberland Throw or our podcast like we are able to do. So thank you to them. And, fellas, go you mighty Eels.